Now, President Uhuru Kenyatta yesterday met American President Donald Trump at the White House in Washington, D.C., and invited the U.S. to increase its trade and investments in Africa. To help us understand a little bit about what happened at that particular meeting, let's now bring in Calvin Dirk. He's the founder, CD Global Strategies Group. It's a public relations and lobbying firm based in Washington, D.C. Calvin, it's morning in Kenya. Good evening to you in the United States.
Good evening to you.
Great, great. From what you've heard, how would you describe the meeting that took place a couple of hours ago? Would you describe it as a success? And if so, a success for who? For Kenya or for the United States?
Well, I have to say, especially compared with other trips from leaders from Africa and around the world, it was a success in that I think it was very well planned, meaning that it wasn't just a handshake, but that both sides came together with very specific things they wanted to accomplish, security and for economics. Now, I think for the U.S. and Kenya, it would be great if these promises, things they talked about, actually come to fruition. But I think for the short term, it was a benefit for Kenya because, as you are probably aware, there's a lot going on here in the United States, and everyone was distracted. So it really allowed President Kenyatta to come in, ask for what he wanted as far as increased cooperation, get the meeting done, and then leave because there were 5 other controversies going on at the same time.
Do you think American President Donald Trump was able to sort of fully focus on that meeting with President Uhuru Kenyatta without thinking about everything else that's going on?
Any other day, I would have said no, he wouldn't have been focused, especially on Kenya or Africa where he doesn't have a clear policy. But I think he was focused today simply because, as you know, he is looking for ways to make up for the controversy going on with investigations and so on. And as you probably saw, right before the meeting with President Kenyatta, he had a what I've never seen before, a press conference by speakerphone with the president of Mexico, because he has an agreement in principle to renegotiate the NAFTA trade deal. So I do think Donald Trump was focused because he knew that the more things that he could check off the list of improving trade relationships, the better. So I think in that sense, it made him more focused.
Okay, President Uhuru Kenyatta will be off to China next week for a meeting with the Chinese president. Without China, how interested do you think America would be in a country like Kenya?
You say without China?
Without China's interest in developing sort of the whole of Africa, do you think that would change America's foreign policy?
Well, I think especially now, the China dynamic I find really interesting because, especially with Donald Trump, he has got 2 things in particular with China. 1, he started a trade war. And 2, he is trying to get a win out of the negotiations with North Korea. And he believes China is standing in the way of that progressing like it should. So I think for those reasons, anything that he can do to increase the arsenal of how he can negotiate with the Chinese, he'll do it. Now, I also think what works in Kenya's favor is terrorism, anti-terrorism cooperation is a very big priority with the administration. And so I think President Trump understands that, or at least his administration does. And so they are going to try more than they would, say, with other countries in the region.
Okay, Calvin, President Donald Trump could have chosen to invite any other African president to the United States. Why do you think he focused on Kenya?
Well, I think as we were just talking, I think security concerns were probably number 1. I think economic partnerships, because there are very significant U.S. companies that want to or are doing business in Kenya, and they have the president's ear. So I think the combination of security, economic potential for U.S. businesses, and the chance to at least interrupt what China is doing a little bit on the African continent, those checked off all the boxes Donald Trump needed to bring him here.
Okay. Calvin, we were not privy to all the discussions that sort of took place yesterday at the White House, but one wonders whether issues of democracy, election transparency, and human rights were mentioned in that meeting. Maybe not. Is America now, quote unquote, a safer place for African presidents who may not want to answer some of those questions?
Well, a short answer is yes, and the longer answer is I hope that changes, because America should be a beacon to let the world know that democracy, respect for elections, human rights are non-negotiable. Unfortunately, that's not a priority for the Trump administration, and some of his own actions and rhetoric in this country take away his credibility to even bring those issues up. So I do think that is going to be a factor with some leaders who may otherwise not want to come to the United States, being afraid to answer those questions. But I hope that changes.
Okay, Melania Trump has announced that she has an Africa tour coming up soon. When do you think President Donald Trump is going to have his African tour? If soon.
You know, I don't know, just because, as you know, we have the midterm elections coming up in November, and that could change the whole tenor of what's happening in Washington. Not to mention, we have the investigations into the Russian interference and potential collusion with Donald Trump's campaign. So I don't think that it's something we should expect in the near future, just because once those issues are resolved, I don't think this administration prioritizes Africa enough to make a trip to Africa a priority for its foreign travel.
Okay, Calvin, thank you so much. I know it's pretty late over there. Let me allow you to now go and get some sleep. Thank you for giving us some of those insights.